Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Authentic Podcast with Justin Doulard. And thank you for tuning in to another episode. It's time!
Dale, appreciate you and both Carlton for coming out today. Wanted to start off with a couple things. And first, we were at the last card, which is it 392?
Which is XFN 392, yeah.
Yes, sir. I guess when you guys announced that you were recently inducted to the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame. So
yeah,
I wanted to lead off and say congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pretty big deal for a guy that's lived his whole life in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And to be the first martial artist to be in the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame, kind of cool too. Thanks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my question on that is that something that you do people nominate you for that or
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know how that process worked. If you knew that you were up for nomination or kind of how you get in, do you get voted in?
I have a best buddy that he's the food and beverage manager at River Spirit Casino Resort, and we've known each other forever, and he's one of my best buddies, and he campaigned really strong. He was the guy who just wouldn't give up, and that's why it happened when it happened, thanks to my buddy Tommy Yardy. But I had been considered a couple of years in a row, and I had some other friends, Chris Plank, the voice of OU football and all OU sports. He also had been campaigning for a while. So,
and Dale, you can move that down a little bit too if you want. If it's in your vision, you can kind of maneuver it. There you go. So,
it's a great acknowledgement, and it was great to be the first martial artist. We've had a lot of great athletes from Oklahoma, and to be in there with Barry Switzer and Barry Sanders and Sean O'Grady and Jim Thorpe, those kind of guys, those kind of athletes from Oklahoma. It's kind of cool. Big deal for me.
Very big deal. Well, congratulations once again.
Thank you much.
So you started martial arts when you were 15 years old. Can you kind of tell me what led you to martial arts?
I was living in a neighborhood where I was a different color than everybody else, and I was going to a school where I was a different color, and I was fighting whether I liked it or not. It's like Hoist Gracie says, sometimes you don't pick the fight picks you. And so this was also at a time when Muhammad Ali was really popular as a boxer, and the world had just experienced martial arts through a guy by the name of Bruce Lee. And so those two were my heroes, and I envisioned myself being a fighter, and I was also looking to be a better fighter because I wasn't winning all these fights by any means.
Is this like junior high? High school?
I was 12, 13 years old.
Okay, so middle school.
And, America was a very different place in 1969. And anyway, that led me to seek out martial arts, and I came across Master D.W. Kong, Korean Grand Master of Taekwondo, and I hounded my mom until she finally gave in and enrolled me at Kong's. And I'm so grateful that that's where I got my start, because I could have had a bad experience in any number of other ways or got hurt or anything. He really immediately took me under his wing and really showed me a lot of attention, and that made me stick it out. I mean, everybody has the story when they were a green belt and they came home with busted up shins because they couldn't afford shin guards, and the sparring, sometimes you go shin to shin, and that hurts. And, I did what everybody else did. I took a week off, and I wasn't planning on coming back until I got that phone call. Why you no come to class? Oh, I'm about to crap my pants, right? I'm back in class the next day, and he cared enough to call me, and that mattered to me, that he noticed I wasn't in class. That made all the difference. And so he gave me the most amazing start in martial arts, and I trained Monday through Friday, fought in every tournament, took every opportunity, and in a year and a half, made my black belt, and that was a big deal because Mr. Kong was a very traditionalist and didn't hand out belts easy, and it's a thing that probably should have took 3 years, but it just spoke to how committed I was, and I pursued that goal, and I didn't know how I was going to make a living. I just knew it was going to involve martial arts, and I never considered anything else from that day forward.
So at what age did you start really ramping up your competition? And I know you said that you knew you were going to do martial arts for a living, but you said you started when you were 12. So is this like high school that you're kind of seeing a future in this?
Yeah, when I was 18, I'd made my mark on the tournament scene. And again, I was an Ali fan. I was a boxing fan, and so I started also doing amateur boxing.
And this is all probably locally or statewide, or
this was Golden Gloves, Oklahoma Golden Gloves, and I've made this amazing discovery that Bruce Lee was right. Mixing martial arts is a great idea. That a guy who can box and kick can beat the crap out of a guy who can't box or a guy who can't kick. And I found that putting my Golden Glove boxing skills together with my Taekwondo black belt skills, I could beat about anybody. And as I began to travel and do the tournaments, the idea of kickboxing or fighting with full contact as opposed to the Karate Kid tournament where you kind of pulled your punches, that had just taken off, and they'd just come up with gloves for martial arts. And kickboxing was kind of a small niche thing, but a new thing in the United States. And when I saw that, I know, okay, that's the deal. That's the path. I didn't really think about making money. I just thought about becoming famous. I wanted to test my skills. I wanted to prove that, I was good, and not just in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I wanted to fight wherever the badasses fought. So I started touring the world and fighting, and again, my boxing skill with my Taekwondo kicking skill made a great combination, and allowed me to win a championship on ESPN. And then my mouth on the microphone afterwards got me to where I got to fight in Japan, and I was one of the few Americans in that era. We're talking the 80s now, that went to Japan and fought under those rules and was successful. Benny the Jet Urquidez was one, Don Wilson another, Maurice Smith, who went on to become a UFC heavyweight champion, another. But we were like the Peter Cunningham. Those were the Americans that went to Asia and won. And when you go to Japan, where martial arts is a national sport, right? Sumo's their national sport, but they love martial arts. You're more than a star. Like in America, you go to a kickboxing event at that point, and you're lucky if there's 500 people there, and they certainly don't know your name or your face. And even after fighting on ESPN and becoming a U.S. champion, there still wasn't a lot of people that knew you. But in Japan, they knew you. They knew the guy from Tulsa, Oklahoma, because it was a big sport there. So for me to go there and win was a big deal, and that opened up the rest of the world to me for things that I never dreamed of.
That kind of surprises me too, just because you said in the 80s, 70s, 80s, there wasn't YouTube or streaming services. So the fact that they knew who you were, despite probably not seeing you unless it was live, I assume, correct?
It was from magazines, and I fought. There was a thing at that point, satellite TV, I guess is what it was called. But yeah, people could, if it was a big deal, like the events we were fighting in, it was USA versus Japan, USA versus Thailand, and they were live broadcasts in Asia, but not in the United States. So I was much more popular in Tokyo, Thailand, Korea than I was in America at that time.
Was that an odd feeling to be so prominent somewhere?
It was way cool. I mean, going to Japan and being treated like a superstar was a big deal.
How often you go when we're talking?
Say that again?
How often are you going? Like, are you going once every couple
three
of
or
months?
I was fighting it once I opened the door to Japan. I was fighting 3 or 4 times a year, right? Before that, I was fighting 10 times a year, because when you're only making $500 a fight, and that's what you're doing for a living, you got to fight as often as you can. And
It was $500 a fight.
well, it might have been. Right? Back then, there were a lot of fights. I drove from Tulsa to Salt Lake City to fight the baddest guy in town for $500. Yeah.
So you took a loss.
I did
on
that a
one
lot of
probably.
times because, again, it wasn't, okay, I'm going to make a living doing this, but it was also, I wanted to prove I was the best, so the $500 was extra. That was a bonus to me. I would have fought for free.
At what point did you get to where you made some sustainable money?
Japan. And again, wasn't even sustainable, but going from, I'd fought on ESPN 23 times. I was the U.S. champion for an organization called the PKA, and they had the ESPN contract at that time. And this was when there was only one ESPN. So you had a lot of viewers, right? So I could get a sponsor that would pay me to wear their stuff.
Okay.
Right, when I fought. And, the payday went up to maybe $2,500, right? My first fight in Japan was for $5,000, and I thought I had arrived. I thought that was big money. And it was certainly better money. Yes. Yeah, that's the kind of money you could live a few months without having to fight after a $5,000 payday back then. But because I became a minor celebrity in the mecca of martial arts at a time when martial art movies, kickboxing movies, was big, I stumbled into a movie contract. And I got offered this lead part on a week's notice.
Is this in Tokyo or back in the States?
I was in Tokyo, and I had just fought. And the fight was on TV. And an offer came to star in a kickboxing Vietnam War movie, but I had to be in the Philippines in 7 days. Anyway, so of course I said yeah. And the next thing I know, I'm in Army fatigues, carrying an M16, sweating my balls off in Manila, the jungle of the Philippines, filming this movie. And the co-star of the movie was also a world champion, and I mentioned him before, Maurice Smith. Maurice held the kickboxing heavyweight title for a decade, and then he learned just enough grappling to beat anybody at that time, and he became the UFC heavyweight champion of the world. Maurice Smith, he's in the UFC Hall of Fame. Amazing guy. But anyway, he and I are the co-stars. It's a buddy film. Starts off in Vietnam, and we end up getting into these underground fights, and bottom line, I had to save him. That's all I can say. But Mo and I had a great time, and I wasn't planning on doing that, and that's how it just sort of happened.
And that it sounds like that pivoted to a couple of other movies.
The producer, David Hung, he goes by Hunt because he always want to admit that you're from Hong Kong when you're trying to sell a movie. Everything was about image back then, but bottom line is we spend a lot of time when you're making a movie start to finish in the Philippines in 4 weeks. You and the guy paying for things, if you're the star, spend a whole lot of time together in that 4 weeks. And anyway, he liked my jokes, so next thing I know, I'm starring his next 9 pictures, and what an amazing adventure that was for me, and financial blessing as well. But just like being a world champion kickboxer in Japan led to me making movies, starring in movies that were shown around the world and on Cinemax and Showtime, made me a more popular kickboxer, and the two things
just kind of
helped me become one of a handful of guys who actually became world famous from kickboxing. We're talking most of this is before UFC, right? By the time UFC was going, I was at the end of my career and was one of the most prolific promoters on the planet of combat sports, but I was at the end of my fight career.
What year, what time frame are we looking right here? Is this the early 2000s?
I retired Okay, I found out a long time ago from Ali that if you're a fighter, that your two biggest paydays are your retirement fight and your comeback fight. So I had 3 of each. But that final retirement was like 1994. So UFC started in what, 93?
That I don't know, but
something like that. So we're at the very beginning of MMA, of UFC, at the very end of my active career. But as a promoter, the very first fight I promoted I was in, the very first fight I was in that I got paid for, I was the promoter. So all through my career, a lot of my fights were right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And
so you were
I've been promoting promoting fights since 1977. I mean, 45 years. We're at now XFN 393 coming up. I had a very multifaceted career as a fighter, an actor, a school owner, a fight producer, a fight promoter, and yeah.
What organizations were these that you were promoting your own fights in? I assume it obviously wasn't XFN. So what did things look like back then? I imagine it was not as regulated and organized. And
back when I first started promoting, they were talking 1977. There was no commission in Oklahoma. You could have had a woman fight a horse. I mean, there was nobody told you couldn't. I just never could find a horse that would agree to the deal, or I'd have probably done it. But anyway, there was no commission, so it was the wild, wild west. You went to a fight. This is not just Oklahoma. There were a lot of states that were like this. If you went to a kickboxing fight in the 70s, you didn't know if it was going to be in a ring or on a platform or some hole in the ground or a wrestling mat or what. You didn't know were there going to be karate gloves, boxing gloves, no gloves.
Shoes.
What were the rules going to be? There wasn't always a weigh-in, so you didn't know how big the other guy was going to be. You damn sure didn't know for sure who you were fighting, and there was no way to look them up on the internet and find out what their style was. So that was all. When I look back on it now, to organize a fight like that first show I did, you got 15 fights on a card. You got 30 fighters from all over the Midwest coming. No cell phone, no computer, how do you make that happen? How do you trust 30 people? They're actually going to show up and fight for $50 or whatever it was we were paying back then. It wasn't a lot of money, right? And the guys who did it, they showed up. They were dependable because it wasn't about the money. We wanted to fight. We were starved for the opportunity to fight. These are guys who were winning the tournaments in the black belt level, but that wanted to kickbox. They wanted to do the real thing. They wanted to, we were all followers of Bruce Lee and his idea of don't be limited by one martial art. And the way to prove who was the best, at least at stand-up fighting at that point, was kickboxing. Muay Thai put that together. Kickboxing put the opportunity for all the people from the standing martial arts to come together, just like UFC did to incorporate all martial arts, including grappling. There was a sport in Japan called K1, and K1 was they were the UFC of stand-up fighting. And they still exist today, and they did a tournament where the 8 baddest guys came and fought down in one night to one guy, and we still do that event here in Tulsa on occasion. And it was how you proved who was best in kickboxing. And that's why I wanted to go and fight in Japan, because that was the motivating factor, try to prove I was best at my weight class anyway. And when UFC came along, it changed a lot of things, and we just saw it as the next evolution, the next part of the evolution of martial arts. We immediately added it to what we were already doing, which was kickboxing rules for the stand-up arts, but we also had judo versus wrestling in the grappling arts. We had all these crazy different martial arts against each other, and that's what made it one of the fun things in the 70s to promote. Was we didn't know what we didn't know. Right? We didn't know what would happen when we put a kung fu master in there against a pro boxer. We didn't know what would happen when we put a taekwondo guy in versus a Thailand kickboxer. But we were a proving ground right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My company, XFN, was finding those answers. We were out to find out what was the best art. And, of course, it started out mostly stand-up, but we did also do, OSU collegiate wrestler versus a judo brown belt. What would happen? Well, let's find out. I hired them both, and we found out. And, the wrestler from OSU that night, he went on to become a UFC fighter, but
who's that?
He got choked out by a Bill Simpson, a local judo brown belt. Carlton, you're gonna have to help me. What's the guy's name? Went in UFC, became very popular, wrestled at OSU and OU at that point. At that time, he was. Pull out your Googler. But here's what you do. Go to Google and type wrestling versus judo. And there'll be some things that come up, and one of the things that come up will be that fight. You can watch it, and in about 30 seconds, people at that time, when it happened live, witnessed the first chokeout they'd ever seen in their life.
Yeah.
The wrestler dove for the single leg. The judo guy sprawled and caught him under the chin with a headlock, and he squeezed. And at one point, you see an arm go limp, and about 15 seconds later, the referee stopped it, separated the guys, rolled the wrestler over, and he has got his eyes open, but nobody is home. He'd been out for about Frank Trigg.
Okay,
Yeah,
I've heard the
very
name, but I don't know
well-known
the time.
UFC fighter. It was Frank Trigg, and people thought we'd witnessed a murder in the ring. We didn't understand a blood choke, and he would be fine long as you let go in time, and he was, and he learned from it and went on to become a great fighter. But no.
So do you think that if the timing had been right for you and that you weren't on the end of your career, that you would have pursued?
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, I fought under an assortment of rules, because in Japan, when you become popular, you get all kinds of offers to do fights. And I fought karate champions with no gloves on, and under their set of rules. I fought in this form of mixed martial arts that came at the same time as UFC, called shoot boxing. And
I was going to ask you, I saw that.
Yeah.
What is shoot boxing?
Shoot boxing is kickboxing and judo. No, there was no fighting. Once the fight went to the ground, there was no fighting. But sweeps and throws and judo throws scored a premium. And if you could choke a guy out or armbar him standing submissions were allowed. There was just no fighting once the fight hit the ground. So it was a crazy set of rules, but I became champion at it.
And shoot boxing?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And I had 3 fights and won them all in Japan, and then I did a shoot boxing fight in Vegas once. So I had 4 fights that were kind of working toward that direction of MMA, but I never fought a full MMA fight, what we would see in UFC today.
I did want to ask kind of what led you to retirement. I don't know how old you were.
I got old.
How old were you?
I think I was pretty close to, I think I was 38 my last fight.
And Carlton was around for, what, 10 of those years? Or was this before?
Heck.
Was this before kids and family life? Or
I remember one of my retirement fights. I broke my arm, and I remember Carlton being in the ring, hugging me after that fight. I mean, he was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, something like that, and Tama was. So yeah, I mean, yeah, they were kind of around toward the end of my career. I mean, they got to witness some of it, some of the fights.
so what happened after retirement?
Oh, somebody offered me money to come back, so I came back. But you mean final retirement?
Yeah, like when
Okay.
you like what was between you quitting and XFN maybe? Were you doing other promotions or?
I was I was always promoting fights, even when I wasn't in them, right? So, and even after I had retired, I continued to promote. So it wasn't always called XFN. That wasn't always the name, but it was my show and
kind of your brand. And
right.
Your...
And I knew you can't fight forever, right? And it's important to pick the right time to quit, because if you don't, you end up broke or you end up hurt with lasting damage. I didn't want that. I wanted to retire at the right time. And I think I did that. I mean, I still have all my teeth and most of my brains, and I'm not monster rich, but I'm not hurting for money. So I think I did right. But I realized that I can promote forever, and that XFN was going to exist long after Dale Cook retired from the ring. I also opened up a martial arts studio, and we focused on teaching kids who didn't have confidence how to win.
And now we're talking late 90s.
This was late 90s. Yeah,
okay.
I was still fighting. I was still acting. I was still had all these things going on, but I'd opened up my school professionally. And it wasn't until after I retired and learned more about how to run a business and how to train employees and how to trust people, how to delegate, that my school became successful as a business. That took some learning, it took some losing, to learn how to do. But I also knew that's something that was going to go on for long after I'm through teaching.
And Paulo's still there today.
Paulo's still at 51st and Mingo in Tulsa, yeah. And, we have 400 active, happy students there, and we still do the same thing. The techniques may have changed. As the sport evolved from karate to kickboxing to mixed martial arts to UFC, we continued to keep adding. I'm still a devout believer in Bruce Lee and his concept that borrowing from every style and throwing the crap away that doesn't work until you get down to the truth. And UFC and the Gracie family went a long way. They took Bruce Lee's idea way far into the future as far as self-defense is concerned. So what we teach kids or what we teach adults today, the techniques are different because they've evolved, because you have to evolve. They continue to evolve. But the principles of respect and discipline and self-control and goal setting, those are never going to change. It's that combination that makes Apollo's unique, and that's why I think there'll be Apollo's martial arts long into the future.
So we're between there and Apollo's. Where did we get to the true XFN? When did XFN start as a true promotion and grow into probably a legitimate business outside of you promoting on the side, it sounds like? Yeah.
When you're the world champion, you have a built-in advantage. It's sort of like today, if I'm promoting Magic Matt Dixon. He's one of the premier blue chip, next going to be superstar in UFC type guys, and we're blessed enough that he's from Tulsa, and we've promoted his fights, and he's the main event on our next show at XFN 393. When you got a guy like that under contract, that's a good thing. Well, I had myself under contract, so when I would fight in Tulsa, I would fight the champion from Brazil, the champion from Japan, the champion from France, etc. Man, that's a great hometown draw because Tulsa had no major sports franchise. My career became what the Tulsa Drillers was, what the Tulsa Oilers were, only I was a year-round thing.
For fighting,
yeah. Right? And then, you have the evolution of gaming in the state of Oklahoma. Casinos start popping up, and I was able to expand my promotions to those venues and build great relationships, including the one I still have today with River Spirit Casino Resort, which is our home base. Having partners like that allows you to do way bigger, greater things. I think your question was, when did XFN become a real legit promotion?
Yeah, or how do you even start a promotion like a legitimate? I mean,
that's going backwards. If you want
like
to know that story.
How many people in the country have started a promotion that has stood for 25 years longer or sustained long term? I mean, it's got to be a small number.
But there's nobody that's sustained longer. We're the longest running mixed martial art promotion in the country. Nobody's been doing combat sports outside of boxing.
Yeah.
No one's been doing combat sports longer than XFN. I mean, what is 46 years? There's nobody that is still around today promoting any form of combat sports that's been around that long. I don't believe so. There's some boxing promoters like Bob Arum that have been around longer, but boxing was the king of sports back then. Combat sports.
What are some of the challenges you have today with being a promoter and running a promotion? I guess
there's a lot of promotions today, right? And everybody thinks that it's easy. It's not. It's a tough hustle. It's not as tough as being a prize fighter, but being a successful fight promoter is a tough hustle, man. And you've got to survive some hits. It's like Rocky said, it's not how hard you can hit. It's how hard you can get hit and get up and keep going. Because, I'll just recently, COVID was a mother bear, right? We were fortunate to be in Oklahoma where we didn't have as long a lockdown. But, we were put out of business for a while, or we were severely limited to the size of our crowd for a while because of COVID. The companies that survive COVID, whatever kind of company you have, deserve a lot of respect.
Sure.
That was not that was not an easy deal to survive and come out of. And
we were not in Oklahoma during the pandemic, so I'd never.
If you were on the east or west coast, it was worse, way worse than it was here.
Yeah.
There are martial arts studios that have never come back.
Yeah. Because
you put somebody out of business for a year, it's tough.
Yeah.
But we survived a lot of years when we were promoting a sport that was very niche. Thank God for Dana White. Dana White made combat sports cool. Dana White saw it, bought it out of bankruptcy with the help of some friends, and he set it to be a major sport where it is today with NFL, Major League Baseball, way past boxing at this point. It's a major league sport. It's one of the top 4 sports on the planet and still growing.
Yeah, and I mean, they post the numbers.
Dana White did that. Without Dana White, this sport dies in its infancy.
What do you think it is about him that...
Balls.
Okay.
He's got balls. He's got vision. He's not afraid to go get it, and he knows he can't do it by himself. He knows what it takes, and he goes... I mean, his friendship with the Fertitta brothers, very wealthy folks in the casino gaming industry.
That doesn't hurt.
They were buds. They grew up together. And when he heard that UFC was in bankruptcy, he found out what it would take to buy it. And all he was buying he'll tell you, was the 3 letters.
Right. It was
there were no assets. The guy who had owned it sold off all the assets long ago. But he knew if it was a real sport, if it had rules, weight classes, gloves, no hair pulling, no biting, if it could be regulated in all 50 states, this could be a major league sport. I knew that because I had fought in Japan. I saw the Tokyo Dome sold out, 60,000 people live on TV. I knew it could be a major sport. I was like Dana. I believed this could be a major sport, but I was trying to be a competitor. I wanted to be the fighter. I was only a promoter because I had to at that point. Okay, well, by the time Dana comes along and sees this sport and loves this sport and falls in love with this sport. It's bankrupt. You can only do it in it's banned in 48 states. Oklahoma was one of the last places they did a show before Dana bought the UFC. He had the partners who had the money. He had the vision to understand it can't be banned in 48 states. Come see this violence. And it needs to be promoted like boxing. It needs to be promoted like NFL. And he knew to hire the one guy that could go to all 50 states and make that happen. Mark Ratner. Mark was the head of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, where all the big boxing fights happen. I was promoting fights in Nevada at that point, in Vegas, because there weren't casinos yet in Oklahoma. So I knew Mark, and Mark had let us do shoot boxing. He let us do Muay Thai. He trusted us to do these wild, crazy sports. This is before UFC.
You were just going back and forth to Vegas?
Yeah. He was pre-framed and open-minded to what Dana was going to come to him with. I want to hire you to be vice president of UFC, and your job is to help us formulate this rule set that can be okayed in every state, that's accepted as a sport. Mark had the respect of all the people in the boxing community, which ran the regulatory bodies.
So he's like a legal representative for the sport company.
He's still vice president to this day. He's vice president of rules and sanctioning and that kind of thing. So he just keeps the thing going now. But then he was the guy out there convincing New York City, you got to regulate, you got to okay this. It's a real sport. He did that, but it was Dana who saw that's the guy who can do this for us. Without that, maybe it doesn't happen. Without that vision, without the understanding, we can't continue as a barred and a backyard brawl type of thing. This has got to be a legitimate sport.
Where did Scott Coker and Bellator come into this as far as timeline goes? Like, does he have a similar background, or is he just kind of a... When
I was fighting and promoting, Scott was promoting. He was promoting kickboxing, and he was promoting kickboxing on ESPN at the same time I was, just like I was.
On the coast, I assume? Or?
On the West Coast, yeah, San Jose. He got into a partnership with that San Jose arena that has the Sharks, the hockey team.
Yeah.
They became partners promoting about the time UFC was coming around. And he wanted to promote the first legal MMA show in California. They'd been on Indian reservations prior to that. He entered a partnership with the San Jose Sharks, or whoever owned the arena. He got California to okay MMA on the state level, not at a casino, at an Indian casino, but at an arena
off the reservation.
Right, and he got the two magic names, Shamrock and Gracie. It was Cesar Gracie. It wasn't Hoist Gracie, but it was a Gracie, and it was Frank Shamrock, and not Ken, who was the popular fighter at the time. But he had the two names. He had Gracie versus Shamrock, and he did it in San Jose at that monster arena. First legal, sanctioned MMA in the state of California. Packed the place. And that partnership went on, and that became Strikeforce MMA. And he built that promotion to where he was on Showtime. He had premier athletes like Frank Shamrock, like Ronda Rousey, and Dana White wanted to buy that. Right? And
he tried to buy that?
He bought it.
Oh, he did?
Yes. And
I guess Strikeforce was the... Okay.
UFC bought Strikeforce. Scott had to sit out for 3 years, no compete clause, but as soon as he came back, who's the competitor of UFC? Well, it was Bellator. Who became president of Bellator? Scott Coker. So...
And is Scott a martial artist background
Scott
too as well?
Scott is a martial artist.
Okay.
Yeah, he's one of the few promoters that was a martial artist before he got in. He's a fourth degree Taekwondo black belt, and under a very esteemed West Coast taekwondo team. This is again where I need my son to help me remember names. Who are we thinking about? That father and son team, and the son became a famous actor, played Brandon Lee in the movie. All my old school martial art friends will know who this is. But anyway, Scott is a friend of mine, and he's brilliant. He's helped me a lot in regards to advice, and I've got to work as a co-promoter with Scott a couple of times, and we brought Strike Force to Tulsa on Showtime, and he's a great friend. I learned a lot from him. He's another one of the guys that saw the same thing that Dana saw, the same thing that I saw. We knew this could be a major league sport.
And now they merged with PFL, correct? Bellator and PFL?
Correct.
Is that right?
That's correct. Not sure what Scott's role will be in that, or if any. He's got a show he's doing in San Jose with a friend of his that was a former kickboxing champion, and he's still got new things going. He's always doing something.
You guys are still pretty close?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when we come to the fights, next Friday or any Friday, we see you guys along ringside in a good, well-run event, very consistent event. It's always very well put on.
Thank you.
But, I know...
I've had a lot of practice.
I know fight week and this month and before that, it can be hectic and it's not always rainbows and butterflies. So what kind of challenges do you run into as a promoter as far as scouting local talent or finding guys to do or people dropping from matches and because you're getting guys that have only sometimes 2 and 3 fights, which I can imagine can be unpredictable.
Sure.
And you want to make good matches. And are you doing all the matchmaking? Are you doing
the first and biggest challenge is to learn how to be successful and have the math add up. Most people never get that far. They go out of business long before they figure that out. But once you've figured that out and you've figured out how to run a promotion business and how to put together great partners like River Spirit, like Triller TV, build great relationships like we have with Frank Mir and people in the game, then okay, now we're just running the thing. What's the next challenge? Oh, it's the fighters. And I'm going to say this as a guy who was a prize fighter for 22 years, had 125 pro fights. Fighters are undependable as hell. They're tough to deal with. They're very self-motivated, and I love them, and we got to have them. But the week of the fight, you're going to hear 2,000 excuses, and I've already heard all of them.
Like what?
I pulled a muscle. I can't get off work that week. Oh, I don't have a ride. Oh, I don't have a drive. Oh, I can't make it. Oh, I forgot I'm already signed a contract to fight for somebody else. Oh, I don't want to fight that guy. Oh, I'm too heavy. Oh, I'm too light. Oh, I'm pregnant. You're going to hear all of that at some point. And it's you got to be flexible as a promoter. You got to be flexible. You got to figure out how to put out all those fires on a day's notice, on 2 days' notice, on a week's notice if you're lucky. But you got to be ready. Every morning when I get up, I'm just waiting. The week of the fight, I'm going, what's the sucker punch that's going to hit me right in the face today? And how am I going to get up?
Has any of that started rolling in yet
Figure
for 393?
Oh, yeah. We've had to replace talent in the last couple of days already. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just part of the game. And people do get injured sometimes.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to say that it's always suspect when it's the week of the fight. Nah, people get hurt. This is a rough game. And you think, okay, that's good. It's going to be all right by week of the fight, and then it's not. And you got to make that call. But it's always a horrible call. My matchmaker is the greatest woman on planet Earth. I love her to death. Jamie Harris is her name. She does a lot of things for me, and she's one of the matchmakers, and she's the one that has to take that call She's the one who has to deliver to me the bad news. And then she's the one who's got to help me figure out how we're going to fix it, whatever it is. I forgot to get my blood work. It's just 1,000 things the week of the fight that you have to be flexible to figure out. And if you're lucky and you've made some relationships along the way with some gyms, with some fighters that you can count on to maybe help you when you got to be flexible, you got to pull a rabbit out of a hat at the last minute, that's a blessing. And that usually doesn't come without you doing it for them a couple of times as well. You know, I got promoter friends I got to save sometimes too.
Sure.
But heck, if you're going into the show a week out and your main event's still good and your big thing you're promoting is still good and your biggest ticket sellers are still on the card and still got fights and all the radio and TV and video and print and billboards you've spent money on still make sense. Those guys are still on the, what a blessing that is. Oh, ticket sales are great. This is going to be a great week, you know? So that's where we're at right now. Ticket sales are great. We haven't really pushed the big, why do I want to come this time, which is going to be what we're going to talk about next, the bare knuckle thing. So we're looking good. We got momentum as the last show sold out. We don't need gimmicks to sell our shows out. We provide an entertaining Las Vegas style night of combat sports, and we're not defined by one thing. You know, we do MMA, we do kickboxing, all on the same card, all on the same night. And this time we're just going to make history by adding the first ever bare knuckle boxing fight in Oklahoma history. And we've picked two great guys to do that, to debut this crazy new sport, which, you know, I wasn't looking to promote bare knuckle anything. But the state of Oklahoma approved bare knuckle boxing. It's coming to the state. And just like 45 years ago, when we did the first mixed combat and like when when Oklahoma regulated and approved mixed martial arts, we were the first to do it. We're going to be the first this time, and we're going to do it right when it comes to bare knuckle boxing. Whether it sticks around or whether the fans like it, that's up to the fans. The fans are going to dictate whether we do more bare knuckle events or less bare knuckle events or no bare knuckle events. That's up to the fans. But I think it's a unique thing. It's the newest evolution. Some might say it's not an evolution. It's actually going backwards to the bare knuckle days. And I might be one of those guys, but we're going to find out. And we're going to put two heavyweights in that cage with no gloves, and we're going to see what happens. We're going to see how fans react to the rawness of that, because you hear those punches, they sound different without gloves on.
It's disgusting.
They do different damage without gloves on.
Yeah. They
do quicker damage without gloves on. Now, it's not going to be a whole night of bare knuckle fighting. It's one fight on a 15-fight card. But boy, the two guys that are going to debut bare knuckle boxing for the state of Oklahoma are two heavy hitters with big fists. And Tommy Brickhands Britton and Hayes the Hooligan Wilson are going to throw down in the middle of that cage. And it's probably not going to be pretty.
No. So were these guys, does anyone train bare knuckle boxing or until you get a...
You don't train bare knuckle boxing by doing bare knuckle boxing, because then you're all jacked up and you can't fight.
So these guys
you got to wear gloves when you're sparring, right? But you do bag work without gloves.
Okay.
To get your hands used to what part's hitting and how it's hitting and how that impact is different, and it is. And let me ask you a question. Why do boxers wear gloves in the first place?
I would say to protect their hands.
That's right. The evolution to go from bare knuckles to gloves wasn't about protecting the guy getting hit. It was about protecting the hands of the hitter. And that's to be considered in this. You can't just go swing wild with bare knuckles, because you hit somebody on top of the head, you knock a knuckle back in the middle of your hand. And I've done it many times with gloves on. It's not fun, and you all of a sudden can't hit as hard. So in reality, in bare knuckle boxing, you got to be a little more strategic. You got to pick your shots a little bit better. You got to hit the face. You got to hit the jaw. You can't afford to hit as hard as you can to the skull, because you won't be hitting again, because you're going to break your hand. That makes this thing a little bit different. It adds a level of strategy to the game that people might not pick up on thinking bare knuckle boxing. They're thinking, wow, this is just going to be a wild swinging brawl. It's probably not. It's probably going to be a little bit more guys picking their shots at first. But as Mike Tyson would say, all strategy goes out the window as soon as that first punch is thrown, and it could just be, it could just be crazy. That's why people are going to show up. That's why people are curious. That's why we want to see what happens. And we got guys that Hayes Wilson has had 42 prize fights. Brickhands Britton has had 24 prize fights. These are guys that have been around the block. I think they're going to make for an entertaining fight. I think you're going to see some back and forth, and it could be fun. But we'll see. We'll let the fans decide if they like it or don't like it.
Was this a tough sell to them when you made that call?
No.
Not at all?
No.
No flinching?
Brickhands Britton has done it before, and Hayes has done it before. He grew up, before he started as a prize fighter, he was fighting in friggin' trailer parks, and there were no gloves. And so...
Where were they fighting bare knuckle?
Caney, Kansas is where Hayes had all of his trailer park fights. And he had a bunch of those before he started kickboxing for us. We tamed the savage and taught him some technique, but he never lost the savage part. And the idea of being the first guy in Oklahoma to do a bare knuckle boxing fight, that appealed to the savage, and the savage jumped all in with both fists. Brickhands Britton, he'd had Golden Glove fights as a boxer in Louisiana as a kid. And then he tried this bare knuckle thing when it was offered to him. And that goes along with a 24-fight MMA career. And he's not the guy I'd pick to meet around the corner or in the back alley or at River Spirit Casino Resort in a bare knuckle boxing fight. But Hayes jumped all over that, and the two of them, I think they're going to bring out the best in each other. And I think that was important to me. If I'm going to do it, I want to give this the best opportunity to be entertaining and to live up to what everyone's expecting. And I think I got the right two guys for the job.
We have a guy that was either currently in and out of XFN that fights bare knuckle in Florida, correct?
You're talking about Smash Nelson?
Yeah.
Smash is probably one of the most popular bare knuckle fighters in the world. Now, he's never fought bare knuckle in Tulsa for us, because this is a first.
Yeah.
But he fights for us, and then he goes to England and fights bare knuckle. He fights for us. He goes to Florida, fights bare knuckle. Between all of his XFN fights, he's taken a bare knuckle fight somewhere, and he's doing damage. He's very successful. He's the guy who's, who I heard articulate the best how important it is to pick your shots.
Was he not an option to get on this card?
He's already booked in a bare knuckle fight somewhere. So, yeah, he's fighting in May in a bare knuckle event. So he wasn't available for this.
So he may be in the future.
It's probably a certainty that he will be in the future if we continue with this. What? If I hit a home run with this shot, if the fans think it's a grand slam, then yeah. Smash would be at the top of my list.
How do you gauge that? You say if it's a home run, if the fans like it.
Brother,
you just have sold out crowd.
2 minutes into this fight, I'm going to know by hearing the volume of the crowd.
That's it.
They're going to let me know right away if they like this or they don't like it. If it's quiet into that fight, that's a message to me. if the roof's about to come off, that's a message to me that, we may not want a whole night of this, but give us more of what we just saw. And I think that heavyweight fight's going to do it.
Yeah,
if I was a betting man, I'd put my money. If I was the betting, I'd put my money on that bare knuckle's going to be a hit.
I'm interested to see it in person because I originally not a fan, but
yeah. And most of the bare knuckle you've seen has been in a ring, or it's been in that circle ring, right?
Yeah, like a boxing ring, right?
Well, you have the ability when you're at the edge of the out of bounds to still do the Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope and pull your head back out of. You can't do that in the cage.
Yeah,
that's going to be an interesting thing to be aware of and to be mindful of if you're a fighter. And if you're an educated fan, that'll be a mindful thing to think about going into the fight. Being against the cage is probably not a good place in bare knuckle any more than it is in kickboxing or MMA.
Do you have any other projects or programs or growth things in the pipeline for XFN? Like the kind of like bare knuckle, brand new, you're doing it, Eric, I'm going to try it. I know you guys are pretty much centrally located in Tulsa. Do you have visions of expanding, or
we have no real need to go anywhere else. We're already a worldwide gig, right? We spent 5 years partnered with UFC Fight Pass, and that's a partnership that's still very much alive. But our events that are not on Fight Pass are on Triller, which is the home of combat sports. That's the world's largest streaming service.
Will 393 be on Triller?
Yeah, okay. We'll be on Triller.
I've never
8 million
Triller.
subscribers. I mean, oh wow. Well, yeah. So anyway, the answer is yes. Opportunities pursue us, and we have some opportunities to bring what we do elsewhere, and we're going to. There are other casino venues, but Tulsa's XFN home base, so we don't find a need to have to go anywhere else. We can bring the greatest fighters in the world to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we have, and we're going to continue to do that. But we've hit on some things in the last few years that we're going to come back to and continue to do. One of those is the 8-man, one-night kickboxing tournament. We also have done the 8-man, one-night MMA tournament, just like the old days of UFC. Now, we haven't done that in a while because the 8-man tournament has really hit a home with kickboxing. And it's the niche kickboxing needed, in my opinion. But we're talking about doing an old school 8-man, one-night MMA tournament at River Spirit as well this year. We have XFN number 400 approaching just 7 fights from now. What are we going to do with that? That's got to be the show topper. That's got to be the greatest event we've ever done.
Kind of like 300 this weekend for
UFC. Yeah, for Dana. That's a huge thing. What a card.
We've
got to top that in our own way, right? We've got to top XFN 300. What did we have for XFN 300? I'll tell you what we had. We had Rumble Johnson. Rumble Johnson in UFC, was out of UFC. This was his first step back into UFC, and it's the only step he needed to fight another former UFC fighter, Jake Rochold. And they put on a bloody one-way battle, and Rumble did it, and he was back in UFC the next day. Randy Couture was there as the host. We made XFN 300 very special. We had incredible world title fight for Thomas Longacre against Marcio Navajo. It was a crazy night, but we've got to top that. And
when you bring a host like Frank or Uriah, who I met several years ago,
right?
Does that typically draw a bigger crowd, or is that just an added bonus?
It justifies. It's the extra special icing that we like to do a couple times a year.
Yeah.
Right. It's special to the people who own the suites at XFN because they get that personal meet and greet with Uriah Faber or Hoist Gracie or Frank Mir or whoever we bring in, Sugar Ray Leonard. So we like to do that a couple times a year to spice it up. We like to do the tournament a couple times a year. We're going to do the return of the MMA tournament. Here, the other thing that we've done in the past that we'd like to bring back is USA versus Japan, USA versus Thailand. Right now in MMA, USA versus Brazil would make a lot of sense.
I know for a while they had pretty heavy African prominence with Kamaru Usman and Izzy.
Yeah.
And there was another one too, Francis Ngannou before he left, because they were all three champions at the same time. And now that's kind of fizzled out temporarily anyway. But how many cards do you guys typically do? It seems like they're every other month, if I'm not mistaken.
We're at River Spirit every other month, so 6 times a year at River Spirit are our big shows. We do a handful of other shows throughout the year. Buffalo Run Casino. There are casino venues in the Oklahoma City area. We've done events at a couple of the Choctaw casinos. We've got a couple of major casino venues that we're trying to close. We're really close to closing deals for. But River Spirit will always be our home base, and that's where we'll always do our biggest and baddest shows.
Dale, before we wrap up and close, we had some notes from Carlton, some cool stories, and we didn't get to catch all of them, which is fine. But I do have to hear about you smuggling money in your socks in the Philippines.
God, I don't know if the statute of limitations is passed on that yet.
Well,
or I don't know if that might be one of those crimes where there is no statute. But let's just say
I picked that out of the list of ones I can't let you leave without.
There was a there probably still is a when you come in the country, in America there's a big sign, and it tells you that if you have more than $10,000 on you, you have to report that income. You have to report that. You have to declare. Thank you. You have to declare that money. And I had negotiated a deal with a company in Thailand, and they were bringing a team of fighters over from Thailand to fight a team of American fighters. And I was not just the promoter. I was one of those fighters that was fighting the guy from Thailand. And I had a really strong clause in the contract that the event was going to air live in Thailand. And there was a TV station that was going to pay the rights to that to me, because I'm the owner, the producer of the event and the show. And I had to have my money in cash in advance. And I didn't do it, so I guess I don't have to worry about it doing anything illegal. But we got through the weigh-ins the night before the show. Everything's perfect, but I haven't seen any cash yet.
You're in Thailand, or
No, I'm in Tulsa. The event was in Tulsa.
Okay.
We were bringing people from Thailand. And the Thai TV company owed me some money for the rights to air the product live on their station. So I approached the guy, the representative from Thailand, about this, and about the money. No finance, no romance. And he said, "Oh, no problem, no problem." He kept telling me no problem. Well, finally it's a problem, right? And they said, "Oh, no problem." He picks up the phone in my hotel room at the Sheraton Kensington, at 71st and Sheridan. That's what it was back then anyway. And he says something in Thai, and the next thing I know, there's a knock on the door, and in comes the 5 fighters. And I'm like, I'm not going to say how much, but they have my money? And he says, yeah. And they took off their shoes. And they had these stacks of $100 bills in each shoe. And that's how they got their money from the TV station over here to pay me for the TV rights. They brought it just like I requested it in cash. That's probably not the story Carlton's. That's not even the story Carlton's talking about. But yeah, they had. I'm not going to say the amount of money while we're recording, but they had that much money in their socks, and that's how they got it here. You're thinking about the time I ended up in the Philippines, and somehow I've got too much money.
Yeah, how often are you carrying cash in your pants and socks? And
I went. This was a wild deal. I'm go to Tokyo, and I'm going to get paid a bunch of money to fight a badass in Tokyo. So and they paid me in cash. So I'm going to get this cash, right?
You get all your.
But
XFN money in cash.
I was going to go to a week in Thailand on vacation. So I brought some cash because I wanted to have cash for my vacation. Well, that was when I ended up getting hired instead of going on vacation to go to the Philippines and star in that movie. And they paid me in cash. So the bottom line is I've got cash for a fight, cash for a movie, and cash for a vacation I thought I was going to have on me. And I've got to fly home from the Philippines. Where am I going to put all this money? So I put money in my socks, in my shoes, and I'm about 4 inches taller than I used to be, right? And I'm just about to get on the airplane. And I went through customs in the Philippines with this money.
A lot of money.
A lot of money. So I go to the bathroom, and I've made it through customs. I'm cool now, so I take out all the money.
Was customs as intense as it was back then? I know airports are a lot different. Was it still pretty intense?
It's pretty intense when you're going to America from Manila. Okay. Manila's a crazy big airport.
Okay.
Anyway, I get all the money out, and I just put it in a tube sock, and I just put it in my pocket now because I'm past customs. I think I'm okay.
Should be.
I'm just about to get on the plane, and a security guard taps me on the shoulder and asks me, what is that bulge in my sock? And this, I don't know if you've seen the movie where the guy's got all this money on him, and he's going to Turkey, and he's got all these drugs on him, and the security guard stops him just like that. Same incident. I'm having a flashback of that movie that this guy's going to take my money that I'm not going to say how much it was, and I'm going to be in some hole somewhere and never heard of again. So I think, I don't know if they're going to get me back somewhere and take care of me or what. I earned all this money legit, or I brought it with me in the first place, but I don't want to get knocked in the head and have all this money disappear, so I just make a gamble, man. I reach in that sock and pull out 2 $100 bills, and I put it in that guy's hand, and I look him in the eye, and I go, it's not that much money. And he says, are you offering this to me? I know how much money a security guard makes in the Philippines. $200 is a lot of money. And I go, yeah. He put it in his pocket, and he let me get on the plane.
Damn.
But my heart was going boom, 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 boom. What was that movie? Something Midnight Express.
That could have
that exact same scene. Yeah, I could have went bad. You're bribing me? I could have been arrested and might never been seen or heard of. But it was a lot of money.
Makes me think of the Wolf of Wall Street when he's like, are you bribing a federal officer? And he's like, no, not at all.
My answer was yeah.
That's
absolutely
awesome.
It was a Filipino officer. Now, when I got to the U.S., and it's time to clear customs there,
there's more.
I had a real. No, that's the end of the story. I'm not telling no more. The rest of it might incriminate me, but yeah. Glad you got that one in there. Got 2 stories out of me that involved smuggling money.
No, those are great. I really appreciate it. Dale, if you don't have anything else, I'm glad to chat with you, and I appreciate you guys coming by. I'd say add in a little bit more about the card or 393 to pitch to the fans, and then we'll cut you loose, and I'll see you next Friday. I'm looking forward to it very much.
It's Friday night, April the 19th, River Spirit Casino Resort. We're in the Cove. We rock that place. It'll be a raucous, sold-out audience with the future stars of MMA and kickboxing, plus the historic debut of bare knuckle boxing.
Looking forward to it. Dale, I appreciate you, and once again, congratulations on your induction to the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame, man.
Appreciate it. Had fun. We'll do it again.